Some people just love networking. They love to go out and meet new people and learn all about them. Other people don't find it nearly as easy. In fact, for them, it's really hard work to try to do networking. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about networking, about making intentional connections, about how to do that and why to do that. Let's get started. Welcome to Vida Bunda, a place where we talk about living intentionally so that we can give and live more abundantly. When I had just arrived in college, I decided in my first year there that I would take advantage and I started going to random buildings. It was a large state university, and I would just go into the building, walk up to the first office that I could see, and walk in there and say, "Hi, I'm a freshman. I'm wondering, what do you do here?" You would not believe the amount of things that I learned by doing that. I found that there was, for example, research going on police cars. I found that there was a place that had a piano in a soundproof room that I could sign up and go and use whenever I wanted to play the piano. I learned so much by just being intentional about walking into buildings and introducing myself and asking what they did there. Now, you might think that that was really easy for me. It was not. That goes against my natural personality, and I really had to push myself to actually take steps to go into those buildings and initiate those conversations. So today we're going to talk about intentional connections, and we're going to share 3 things about intentional connections. And the first of those is that we need to decide who we want to connect with intentionally. And of course, the first question is always why? Why should we try to be intentional in connecting with other people? We need to think about that first and establish what it is that we're trying to learn, perhaps, what it is that might help us in life, because that's going to help to determine, once we understand why we're doing it, it's going to be easier to figure out who we should go to and who we should try to connect with. So we can ask ourselves a question like, what is it that I need to learn? And then we can say, well, who might be able to help me to learn that? Maybe it's somebody I already know. Maybe it's somebody I don't know yet. Now, as we do this, I'd like to encourage you to not look at outward appearances. There are some very flashy people out there that are good salesmen or salespeople that seem to have all the answers and have it all together. That might not necessarily be the best person to help you. It could be, but sometimes the wisest people, the people who know the most about something, could be maybe even socially awkward. They might not be extroverted very much, and yet we can learn so much from those individuals. So think about maybe an elderly person in your community that might be able to teach you something that you don't know yet, and reach out to them and ask if they'd be interested in helping you to learn that. And don't just think about both the personal connections that you have. So when we're thinking about who we're going to connect with intentionally, I want us to think about 2 different spheres. The first is on the personal front. Who could I meet with? Who could I be more intentional in connecting with so that I can grow and develop as an individual, as a person, as a human being? Secondly, it's the business side of things, the professional networking. Those are also very important relationships and can be very useful to help us in our careers. But that's a different kind of thing. Maybe you're going to join a professional association or going to go to events. That might be different from connecting on a personal level with a faith community, for example. So the first step on intentional connections is deciding with whom you need to connect. Once you have decided that, then we can plan purposeful connections. So this is the second step for being more intentional in our connections, and that is to actually plan purposeful connections. When we talk about planning purposeful connections, we're not just talking about the when or the where we're going to meet, but we're also thinking about the why. Why do I want to meet with this person or with this group of people? What is it that I'm hoping to learn from them today? Or what is the purpose of this specific meeting? And it could be, especially early on, that the whole purpose of the meeting is just to get acquainted. And that's perfectly fine. If you come into the relationship like, okay, well, I want to learn about such and you better start teaching me now, that's probably not going to go very well. So take time initially to just really invest in getting to know each other, building that trust in the relationship, and seeing if you click. Because it could be that you actually don't click with that person very well. Now, just because you don't click with somebody doesn't mean that you can't continue to meet with them, but it depends on the type of relationship and what the objectives of the relationship are. Sometimes we can actually learn a lot from people that we don't click with very well. But depending if it's for personal character development, you might want to find somebody that you click with a little bit better if you're going to be intentional in that relationship. Now, as we think about planning purposeful connections, let's remember also reciprocity, right? It's not just about what I can get from this relationship, from that other person that I'm meeting with. It needs to be a two-way street. Perhaps I have something to offer that person as well. Let's go back to the example of an elderly person in your community who might not feel very useful right now, and yet they are filled with years of experience and knowledge that they can share. So you can benefit from them by meeting with them and learning, gaining their wisdom. But at the same time, the fact that you're coming and approaching them and meeting with them and spending time with them can really help that other person to feel valued, valuable, and loved. Now, all of us are limited by time, right? Time is one of our most valuable resources, and there simply just doesn't seem to be enough of it sometimes. And so as we are planning our purposeful connections, we want to make sure that we're diversifying our time investment. What do I mean by that? Think about what kinds of things you want to be learning about, both professionally and personally, and make sure that you're scheduling time for both of those kinds of things. You could spend your entire life going to professional gatherings and networking for the business world and miss out on purposeful connections that can really help you in your personal life. So, decide with whom you want to connect. Plan some purposeful connections. But the third thing I want to just mention is to always be available for spontaneous connections. You never know what's going to happen or where those are going to go. One time I was sitting on a plane flying, and there was a couple sitting next to us. That couple had food poisoning, and during the entire course of the flight, they were just very, very sick. We reached out to them when we got to our destination and just asked if there was anything we could do to help them, and exchanged emails toward the end of the time together, and really just kind of lost touch. But we emailed every once in a while. I sent some emails every once in a while. Many, many years later, I was going to be traveling through the place where they had lived. And so I wrote them an email and just said, hey, I'm going to be passing through the city. Do you still even live there? And do you remember me? We met on that plane. These people wrote back, and they were so excited that we had reconnected, and they invited me to their house, and we got together and just shared wonderful times of friendships. And that they ended up really supporting our work. And it just turned out to be a fantastic relationship. And it all happened because of a spontaneous conversation that happened during the course of a flight. So as we're going through life, let's be open to those spontaneous moments and pursue them with wisdom, right? We want to be careful about talking to strangers sometimes and how we engage in there. We want to do that in a wise way that doesn't come across as overbearing or threatening. We want to do that, but take advantage of those moments. Sometimes we get so caught up in just our trip or our business or whatever it is we're trying to do that we really miss out on spontaneous connections that could actually greatly enrich our lives. And then there's some practical things too. According to CNBC, research shows that 70% of jobs aren't even advertised on public job sites, and that 80% of jobs are obtained through personal and professional connections. So being intentional about building those connections can actually be very beneficial to us in many different ways. So let me encourage you as we wrap up today. Just take some time to think about who could you connect with more intentionally? Who is it that you want to be more intentional about connecting with? And what can you do about it in the next 2 weeks? If you'd like help in thinking about that, I have a one-page, really simple tool that you can use to guide you through some questions about reflecting about intentional connections in your life. It's absolutely free. All you need to do is go to vidabunda.com, click on the Contact Us, and request the tool about intentional connections. We'd love to hear from you. That's vidabunda.com. Click on Contact and request the tool for intentional connections. Thank you for joining us today. So glad to have you. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.